The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Confederation towered above Jessica Thompson as she straightened her navy blue blazer. The former art history professor from Kansas had never imagined her expertise in human creativity would lead her to become Earth's first cultural exchange representative. The crystalline walls pulsed with soft light, and alien delegates from 100 worlds filled the spiral seating arrangement that stretched toward the distant ceiling. "The human representative may approach," announced the resonator speaker, their crystalline form chiming gently with each word. Jessica walked forward, her footsteps echoing in the chamber. She couldn't help but notice how the other species watched her, with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. The terraforms, with their silicon-based bodies that resembled living sculptures, barely glanced in her direction. The Unity, their iridescent forms shifting like living auroras, whispered among themselves in frequencies she could barely perceive. Only the Florins, with their vibrant plant-like bodies, showed genuine interest, their flower-petal eyes tracking her movement. "We have assigned humanity the Cultural Exchange Division," the speaker continued. "This position will allow your species to share your artistic endeavors while you develop more advanced capabilities." Jessica caught the subtle condescension in the speaker's tone. The Cultural Exchange Division was clearly meant to be a harmless corner where humans could be kept occupied, while the real species handled important matters like interstellar trade and technological development. "Thank you, Speaker," Jessica replied, keeping her voice steady. "I have prepared a small demonstration, if the chamber would permit it." The speaker chimed in surprise, their crystalline form reflecting rainbow patterns across the chamber. "Proceed." Jessica pulled out a small holoprojector from her pocket. With a tap, it came to life, projecting a sequence of Earth's greatest artistic achievements into the center of the chamber. The Mona Lisa's mysterious smile floated alongside Aboriginal Australian dot paintings. The Great Pyramid of Giza rotated next to the Taj Mahal. A chorus from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony played while showing the Sydney Opera House. "These are not technical schematics," observed a terraform representative, their silicon form shifting in confusion. "No," Jessica agreed. "These are works of art, created purely for the sake of beauty and expression." "Inefficient," declared a Unity member, their aurora-like form flickering. "What purpose does this serve?" Jessica smiled. "May I ask, how do your species cope with emotional distress? With joy? With the fundamental questions of existence?" The chamber fell silent. The Unity flickered uncomfortably. The terraforms remained perfectly still. Even the resonator's gentle chiming ceased. "Through art," Jessica continued, "humans process our emotions, challenge our assumptions, and imagine new possibilities. Every piece you see here was created not because it served a practical purpose, but because it helped us understand ourselves and our place in the universe." She gestured to the hologram as it showed the cave paintings of Lascaux. 17,000 years ago, our ancestors painted on cave walls not because they needed to, but because they wanted to share their stories, their experiences, their understanding of the world. This drive to create, to express, to share, it's fundamental to who we are as a species. The Floran representative leaned forward, their petal eyes widening. "You create, without purpose. We create to give life purpose," Jessica corrected gently. "And perhaps that's something we can share with the Confederation." As she finished speaking, Jessica noticed something extraordinary. The resonators were chiming in harmony with the lingering notes of Beethoven's symphony. The terraforms had shifted their forms to mirror the architectural patterns of the Taj Mahal. The Unity's auroras were pulsing in rhythm with the Aboriginal arts patterns. They didn't realize it yet, but the chamber had just experienced their first taste of humanity's most powerful force, the ability to touch hearts and minds across any boundary, even the stars themselves. The Cultural Exchange Division might have been meant as a symbolic gesture, but Jessica Thompson knew better. She had just planted the first seed of a revolution, not one of technology or military might, but of imagination and creativity. And like all the best human innovations, It would grow in ways no one could predict. 3 months into her role as cultural exchange representative, Jessica Thompson found herself mediating a crisis that threatened to tear the Confederation apart. The Resonators and Terraforms were locked in a bitter dispute over mining rights in the Centauri sector, their fundamental differences in perceiving reality pushing them toward conflict. The crystalline nature of this system belongs to us by right, the Resonator ambassador chimed, their form vibrating with barely contained fury. The Terraforms seek to shatter our ancestral grounds. Your ancestral grounds are necessary for our children's growth cycle, the Terraform representative countered, their silicon surface crackling with geometric patterns of agitation. Without these specific mineral formations, an entire generation will fail to achieve proper structural integrity. Jessica sat between them in the meditation chamber, watching as both species retreated further into their own perspectives. Traditional diplomatic approaches had failed. The logical arguments of the Unity and the strategic proposals of the Sentinels had only deepened the divide. Then she remembered something from her teaching days. "Before we continue," Jessica said, rising from her seat, "I'd like to share something from Earth." A piece of music composed by a human named Johann Sebastian Bach. The aliens turned to her with mixed expressions of confusion and impatience, but protocol demanded they at least pretend to listen. Jessica activated the chamber's acoustic system, and the first notes of Bach's "The Well-Tempered Clavier" filled the space. The effect was immediate. The Resonator's crystalline forms began to vibrate in harmony with the mathematical precision of Bach's counterpoint. The Terraforms, initially still, started shifting their silicon patterns to match the music's structured progression. This composition, Jessica explained as the music played, was created using a mathematical system we call equal temperament. Bach wrote it to demonstrate how different musical keys, which are like different fundamental frequencies of existence, could work together in perfect harmony while maintaining their unique characteristics. The Resonator ambassador's chimes softened. The mathematical ratios, they're perfect. And yet, the Terraform representative observed, their surface now flowing in smooth, fascinated patterns. There's variation within the structure, like our own growth patterns. Jessica nodded. Human music often finds beauty in the balance between order and emotion, structure and expression. Bach understood that different notes, different keys, different voices could coexist not despite their differences, but because of them. As the piece continued, something unprecedented occurred. The Resonators began to emit harmonics that complemented Bach's composition, their crystalline forms resonating with each new phrase. The Terraforms, in response, shifted their silicon structures to create visual representations of the music's mathematical patterns. Perhaps, the Resonator ambassador chimed thoughtfully, we could apply this principle of harmonious coexistence to the Centauri sector. The Terraform representative's surface rippled with possibility. Our growth cycles, they could be timed to match your natural harmonic frequencies. We never considered synchronizing our needs. Jessica watched as the two species began discussing cooperative mining techniques, ways to preserve crystalline structures while allowing for silicon growth cycles. Bach's music continued to play, providing a foundation for what would become known as the Centauri Compromise. Later, in her private quarters, Jessica received a message from Earth's diplomatic corps congratulating her on resolving the crisis. But she knew the truth. She hadn't solved anything. She had simply introduced two species to a human concept they had never considered. That mathematics could serve beauty, that structure could support creativity, that differences could create harmony rather than discord. As she looked out at the stars, Jessica could hear faint echoes of Bach floating through the station's corridors. Somewhere, a resonator was attempting to recreate the piece, their crystalline form learning to sing in ways their species had never imagined possible. In another section, a group of terraforms was crafting silicon sculptures inspired by the mathematical patterns of human music. The revolution was still quiet, but it was growing, one note at a time. Michael Rodriguez stood before his computer setup in the Confederation's Technology Exchange Hub, surrounded by curious aliens watching his every move. The game developer from Arizona had never expected his hobby of creating virtual worlds would draw such attention from across the galaxy. In this simulation, he explained, launching his latest project on the holographic display, players can experience stories that never happened and make choices that shape the narrative. A young terraform, their silicon surface shimmering with interest, moved closer to the display. But what is the training objective? Michael smiled. There isn't one. This is purely for entertainment. The gathered aliens exchanged confused glances. The concept of creating complex technological simulations for mere enjoyment seemed absurd to them. The Unity representatives, in particular, flickered with barely concealed skepticism. "Watch this," Michael said, loading up a saved game. The display showed a vast space exploration game he'd been developing. In this virtual universe, players can discover new worlds, build civilizations, or become traders. Every choice creates a unique story. The young terraform, who had introduced themselves as Crystal Pattern 7, reached out toward the controls. "May I attempt this entertainment?" Michael adjusted the neural interface to accommodate their silicon-based biology. "Of course, just remember, there's no wrong way to play." As Crystal Pattern 7 began exploring the virtual galaxy, something remarkable happened. Their usually rigid geometric patterns began flowing in new, unpredictable ways. Other aliens gathered closer, watching in fascination as the young terraform discovered the joy of unstructured play for the first time. "I created a trading route that does not exist," Crystal Pattern 7 announced, their form pulsing with what Michael recognized as excitement. "And now I am imagining stories about the virtual merchants who might use it." A Unity representative moved forward, their aurora-like form swirling with curiosity. "You are engaging in deliberate fantasy, without purpose." "The purpose is fun," Michael explained, opening another game. This one was a multiplayer strategy game he'd modified for alien neural interfaces. Would anyone else like to try? Within hours, the Technology Exchange Hub had transformed. Unity members were competing in virtual races, their energy forms streaming through digital obstacle courses. Resonators discovered rhythm games, their crystalline forms chiming in harmony with the beat. Even the stoic sentinels found themselves drawn to strategy games, analyzing and reanalyzing possible approaches to virtual challenges. "This is unprecedented," remarked Jessica Thompson, who had stopped by to observe. "They're not just playing the games, they're learning to imagine." Michael nodded, watching as Crystal Pattern 7 explained the concept of role-playing to a fascinated group of young aliens. "Games are humanity's way of exploring possibilities. Every time we play, we're asking what if." News of the human gaming revolution spread quickly through the Confederation. Within weeks, Michael found himself leading workshops on game design for alien developers. The terraforms, with their natural ability to reshape themselves, proved particularly adept at creating immersive virtual environments. The Unity, once they embraced the concept of imaginative play, began developing games that explored emotional connections in ways humans had never considered. The first Intergalactic gaming tournament was announced 3 months later. Crystal Pattern 7, now known throughout the Confederation as an esports pioneer, led a team of mixed species in competitions that combined strategy, creativity, and cooperation. But the most profound change came in unexpected ways. Young aliens raised with access to human games began approaching problems differently. They learned to think creatively, to consider multiple solutions, to embrace the concept of play as a valid way of understanding the universe. In his quarters that evening, Michael watched streams of alien players enjoying his games. Crystal Pattern 7 was broadcasting their latest adventure, their commentary filled with enthusiasm and imagination that would have been unthinkable just months ago. "This is why we make games," he said to himself, smiling as he watched a Unity player teach a resonator how to use a virtual fishing rod. Not to escape reality, but to imagine how reality could be different. The revolution of play had begun, and there was no turning back. Emily Parker wiped beads of sweat from her forehead as she surveyed her experimental garden aboard the Confederation space station. The chef from Oregon had transformed an unused storage bay into a thriving hydroponics facility, much to the bewilderment of her alien colleagues. Growing food for pleasure seemed as strange to them as gaming had once been. But now, as the Floran species faced a devastating nutritional crisis, her hobby had become their last hope. The mineral absorption rates continue to decline, reported the Floran representative, their leaf-like appendages drooping with distress. Our youngest saplings can no longer process essential nutrients from our traditional food sources. Emily walked through rows of earth vegetables, herbs, and fruits growing under artificial sunlight. Tell me again about the compounds your species needs to thrive. The Floran's petals rustled as they projected a holographic chart of complex molecular structures. Emily studied them, remembering her days experimenting with fermentation techniques back on Earth. I think, she said slowly, we might be able to help, but you'll need to trust some very old human wisdom. Within days, Emily had converted part of her garden into a fermentation station. Jars of kombucha bubbled alongside containers of kimchi and miso. She had realized that the beneficial microorganisms humans had cultivated for thousands of years might help the Florans break down nutrients they could no longer process naturally. You deliberately encourage microscopic life forms to transform your food, asked a terraform observer, their silicon surface rippling with a mixture of fascination and horror. Fermentation is one of humanity's oldest food preparation techniques, Emily explained while checking the temperature of a specially modified batch of sauerkraut. Our ancestors discovered that certain beneficial bacteria could make food not just more digestible, but more nutritious. The first trials exceeded all expectations. Young Florans fed with fermented plant extracts began showing improved mineral absorption rates. Their wilting leaves grew strong and vibrant, and their natural bioluminescence, which had been fading, returned stronger than ever. But Emily's influence didn't stop there. As word of her success spread, other species began visiting her garden. The resonators discovered they could enhance their crystalline resonance by consuming specially fermented mineral solutions. The Unity found that certain herb combinations helped stabilize their energy patterns during long-distance travel. You must teach us more about Earth's food science, the Floran representative insisted during a council meeting. Their form now glowed with healthy luminescence, a testament to the success of Emily's treatments. Emily smiled, remembering her small restaurant back in Portland. I'd be happy to, but first, I think it's time for something special. She organized the first Intergalactic food festival aboard the station. Each booth showcased a different Earth cuisine, modified to be safe and nutritious for various alien biologies. The aromas of curry, pizza, tamales, and dozens of other dishes filled the station's main promenade. The event proved transformative. The Florans discovered they could create new nutrient-rich hybrids by applying fermentation techniques to their traditional crops. The terraforms, inspired by human agricultural methods, began developing silicon-based gardens in previously uninhabitable environments. Even the Unity, who normally absorbed energy directly from stars, found themselves drawn to the social aspects of sharing meals. In her quarters that evening, Emily reviewed messages from across the Confederation. Pictures showed alien families gathering around dinner tables for the first time, sharing meals in the human tradition. The Floran nurseries reported a complete recovery among their youngest members, with new growth patterns showing unprecedented adaptability. Food has always been more than sustenance, she wrote in her daily log. It's about connection, innovation, and survival. Now those basic human truths are spreading across the stars. She looked out her window at the garden she'd created. Among the earth plants, new alien varieties were beginning to flourish, creating hybrid species that had never existed before. Like humanity's influence itself, they were growing in unexpected and beautiful ways. James Anderson leaned back in his chair aboard the Unity meditation chamber. his latest novel floating as a holographic projection between him and his unusual audience. The Minnesota author never imagined his science fiction stories would captivate beings of pure energy, but the Unity members surrounded him like a living aurora borealis, their forms rippling with curiosity. But none of these events occurred. One Unity member pulsed, their energy patterns shifting in confusion. Why invest time in experiencing false narratives? James smiled, adjusting the neural translator. Fiction isn't about what happened. It's about what could happen, or what should happen, or even what we fear might happen. It's how humans explore possibilities. The Unity Collective shimmered as they processed this concept. As telepathic beings who shared all experiences directly, the idea of deliberately crafting untrue stories for entertainment had initially seemed nonsensical to them. "Show us more," requested another Unity member, their form glowing brighter with interest. James nodded and began reading from his latest work, a story about a lonely stellar cartographer who befriends Ascension Nebula. As he read, something extraordinary happened. The Unity members began to change color, their energy patterns synchronizing with the emotional beats of the story. When the cartographer felt lonely, they dimmed to deep blues. During moments of discovery, they pulsed with bright golds and silvers. "We are experiencing emotions that are not our own," one Unity member observed, their form flickering with excitement. "These characters, they do not exist, yet we feel their feelings." "That's empathy," James explained. "Stories help us understand experiences we've never had, feel things we've never felt. It's how humans learn to see the world through other perspectives." The impact of human storytelling spread through the Unity Collective like wildfire. Within weeks, James found himself hosting writing workshops for energy beings eager to create their own tales. The Unity, with their ability to share experiences directly, began developing entirely new forms of narrative art. "Watch this," said his regular student, a Unity member who had taken the name Aurora. Their form expanded, creating a three-dimensional light show that told a story through patterns and pulses. "I imagined a tale about a young Unity discovering they can change their frequency." James watched in amazement as the story unfolded in waves of light and color. "You've created something entirely new," he said. "Not quite human literature, not quite Unity shared experience. Something in between." The first Intergalactic book club formed shortly after, with members from all species gathering to share stories. The terraforms contributed tales carved in living crystal. The Florents performed narratives through changing patterns of bioluminescence. The resonators composed musical epics that blended their traditional harmonics with human-style plot structures. But the most profound change came from within the Unity itself. A generation of young Unity members, raised on human stories, began to develop stronger individual identities. They still shared the collective consciousness of their species, but now they also cultivated personal narratives, unique perspectives, and individual dreams. "We are becoming more than we were," Aurora told James during one of their weekly writing sessions. "Through human stories, we have learned that unity does not require uniformity." In his quarters that evening, James received a transmission from the Unity Collective. They had created their first anthology of original fiction, dedicated to him. As he watched their stories play out in patterns of light and energy, he recognized familiar themes: hope, fear, love, loss, triumph, and discovery. "Stories are humanity's greatest technology," he wrote in his journal. "We created them to make sense of the universe, to share experiences, to dream of what might be. Now those dreams are spreading across the stars, taking forms we never imagined possible." Outside his window, a group of Unity children practiced their storytelling, their young forms dancing with colors as they invented new tales. Like imagination itself, they were unlimited by physical bounds, free to explore the infinite possibilities that stories could create. Marcus Wright adjusted the gravity controls in the station's training chamber, his years of dance instruction in Texas never preparing him for teaching aliens with twice Earth's normal gravity preferences. A group of sentinel warriors stood before him, their metallic exoskeletons gleaming under the adaptive lighting system. Movement is more than just getting from point A to point B, Marcus explained, demonstrating the simple spin. It's about expressing what words cannot say. The sentinels watched with their characteristic intensity. As a species devoted to precision and strategic excellence, they had initially approached human dance as a potential combat technique. What they discovered instead was reshaping their entire culture. Observe how the movement flows, Marcus continued, transitioning into a series of fluid motions. Each gesture connects to the next, like thoughts forming a story. The lead sentinel, designated Prime Sequence 1, stepped forward, their exoskeleton weird as they attempted to mirror Marcus's movements. The first attempts were rigid, mechanical, but Marcus noticed something interesting in their effort. Don't try to copy exactly, he suggested. Feel the rhythm and let your body respond naturally. Sentinels do not act without purpose, Prime Sequence 1 stated, their voice modulator expressing confusion. What is the tactical advantage of this motion? Marcus smiled, remembering similar questions from his first-time students back on Earth. Let me show you something different. He pulled up a holographic display showing footage of capoeira practitioners. This Brazilian martial art combines dance and combat. The dancers are also warriors, but their strength comes from creativity and flow rather than rigid forms. The sentinels' collective attention sharpened. Their sensor arrays tracked every movement, analyzing the seamless blend of artistry and martial skill. Prime Sequence 1's exoskeleton shifted, attempting to incorporate the fluid motions into their standard combat protocols. Our standard combat matrices do not account for such unpredictable patterns, another sentinel observed, their designation flashing as Combat Analysis 7. Exactly, Marcus replied. That's what makes it effective. Dance teaches us to move in ways others don't expect, to find beauty in spontaneity. Over the next few weeks, the training chamber became a laboratory of movement innovation. The sentinels began incorporating elements of human dance into their training routines. Their traditionally rigid formations evolved into flowing patterns that were both beautiful and tactically unpredictable. Prime Sequence 1 proved an especially dedicated student, their exoskeleton gradually adapting to allow for more fluid motion. We are discovering that grace does not compromise strength, they noted during one session. It enhances it. The breakthrough came during a diplomatic security demonstration. The Sentinel Honor Guard, traditionally known for their intimidating precision, performed a ceremony that blended their martial disciplines with elements of human dance. The display left other species stunned, particularly when the warriors demonstrated how their new movement patterns could seamlessly transition into highly effective defense formations. Your dance traditions have applications beyond combat, Prime Sequence 1 told Marcus after the demonstration. We are finding that flexible thinking promotes flexible movement, and flexible movement promotes adaptive strategy. The influence spread throughout Sentinel society. Young cadets began incorporating dance warm-ups before combat training. Sentinel engineers redesigned their exoskeletons to allow for greater range of motion. Even their architectural designs started showing more curved lines and flowing forms, moving away from their traditionally angular structures. In his personal log that evening, Marcus watched recordings of Sentinel training sessions. Their movements had evolved beyond simple mimicry of human dance styles into something entirely new, a fusion of rigid precision and fluid grace that reflected their evolving perspective. Dance has always been about breaking barriers, he wrote. On Earth, it crossed cultural and language boundaries. Now it's crossing the boundaries between species, teaching us all that strength can be beautiful and beauty can be strong. As he finished writing, he noticed Prime Sequence 1 practicing alone in the training chamber, their movements smooth and confident. The warrior dancer was creating something new, a form of expression that had never existed before. Like humanity's influence throughout the Confederation, it was both a gift and a catalyst. sparking changes that no one could have predicted. Lisa Cooper stood in the middle of the space station's newly constructed recreation zone, watching as alien children from a dozen species explored the colorful playground equipment. The kindergarten teacher from Michigan never imagined her expertise in child development would become crucial to the Confederation's future. "Tag, you're it," shouted a young Florin, their bioluminescent leaves flashing with excitement as they chased a terraformed child whose silicon surface sparkled with joy. The simple game had spread like wildfire among alien youth, teaching them concepts of friendly competition and social interaction. "Their efficiency metrics are declining," observed a concerned Unity Guardian, their energy form flickering with worry. "They spend recreational periods engaging in purposeless activity." Lisa smiled, remembering similar concerns from parents throughout history. "Play isn't purposeless. Watch closely." She pointed to a group of young sentinels who had discovered jump rope. Their movements, once strictly regulated for combat training, now flowed with natural rhythm. Nearby, resonator children created musical patterns by tapping different parts of their crystalline forms, teaching themselves about harmony through play. These activities develop problem-solving skills, creativity, and social bonds, Lisa explained. Humans discovered long ago that children learn best when they're having fun. The impact of human play concepts had started small. A handful of children learning hopscotch, a few young ones exploring with building blocks. But like all powerful ideas, it grew exponentially. The recreation zone now included swings modified for different alien physiologies, climbing structures that challenged various forms of movement, and art stations where children could express themselves freely. "My offspring created this," announced a proud terraform parent, displaying a sculpture their child had made from repurposed materials. They called it imagination building, a concept they learned from human children. The most remarkable changes appeared in the youngest generation. Unity children developed individual play preferences while maintaining their collective consciousness. Young sentinels incorporated playful movements into their training routines. Florin saplings created elaborate games involving light patterns and growth cycles. "We're observing unprecedented neural development," reported the station's science officer, reviewing data from various species. "The introduction of unstructured play is stimulating growth patterns we've never seen before." Lisa organized the first Intergalactic Children's Festival, bringing together young ones from across the Confederation. The event featured traditional games from Earth adapted for alien participants. Modified soccer matches where Unity players could pass through the ball, hide-and-seek games that challenged different sensory capabilities, and art projects that celebrated diverse forms of expression. "Look at this," Lisa said to Jessica Thompson, who had stopped by to observe. A group of children from different species had invented their own game, combining elements from their various cultures. They used Unity light patterns as boundaries, resonator chimes as scoring signals, and terraform-shaped obstacles as challenges. "They're not just playing our games anymore," Jessica noted. "They're creating new ones." The transformation extended beyond recreation. Young aliens began approaching education differently, asking questions their species had never considered before. They showed greater adaptability, stronger problem-solving skills, and more creative approaches to challenges. In her quarters that evening, Lisa reviewed messages from alien parents across the Confederation. They reported changes in their children that would have seemed impossible months ago. Increased curiosity, stronger emotional intelligence, better cooperation skills. "Play is humanity's first language," she wrote in her teaching journal. "Before we had words, we had games. Before we had schools, we had playgrounds. Now we're teaching the galaxy that learning doesn't have to be serious to be significant." Outside her window, she watched as a young Unity child taught the Sentinel youth how to make shadow puppets using their energy form. The Sentinel, in turn, showed the Unity child how to create defensive formations as a game. Together, they created a new activity that was neither purely human nor purely alien, but something wonderfully in between. The next generation would grow up knowing something their parents never did, that the most profound discoveries often start with simple play. A great crystalline chamber in the heart of the Confederation hub station sparkled with the combined presence of every member species. One Earth year had passed since Jessica Thompson first introduced human culture to the galactic community. Now, as she stood before the assembled representatives, she marveled at how much had changed. "The Confederation faces an unprecedented challenge," announced the resonator speaker, their chimes carrying notes of both concern and hope. "The quantum storm approaching from the galactic core threatens all our worlds." Holographic displays showed the massive disturbance that defied traditional physics. It disrupted unity energy patterns, destabilized terraform crystalline structures, and interfered with resonator harmonics. Conventional solutions had failed. "Perhaps," Jessica suggested, stepping forward, "it's time to try something unconventional." She gestured to her colleagues. Emily Parker's experimental gardens now produced hybrid foods that could sustain multiple species. Marcus Wright's dance-inspired movement patterns had revolutionized space station design. Michael Rodriguez's games fostered problem-solving across species barriers. James Anderson's stories helped different species understand each other's perspectives. Lisa Cooper's insights into play and learning had transformed education throughout the Confederation. "Humans have taught us that strength lies in adaptation," Prime Sequence 1 declared, their exoskeleton flowing with dance-inspired grace. "Our traditional combat algorithms would have never conceived of this, but through human art, we learned to think differently." The Unity Collective pulsed in agreement, their young members displaying the individualistic creativity they developed through human stories and games. "We propose a solution combining all our strengths in the way humans have shown us." The plan they devised would have been impossible a year ago. Unity children, with their game-developed creativity, suggested using their energy forms to create protective barriers. Sentinel dancers calculated how to move entire space stations in flowing, unpredictable patterns to dodge the storm's worst effects. Terraform engineers, inspired by human virtual reality games, developed new ways to reinforce their structures. "Look at what they're doing," Michael whispered to Jessica as they watched the preparations unfold. Young aliens from every species worked together, applying concepts from human culture in ways humans had never imagined. The resonators composed complex harmonies based on Bach's mathematics to stabilize quantum fluctuations. Floran botanists used Emily's fermentation techniques to create biological shields. The youngest generation, raised on human games and stories, approached the crisis with unprecedented creativity and cooperation. When the quantum storm finally hit, it encountered something entirely new in the galaxy. A civilization that had learned to blend logic with creativity, structure with spontaneity, unity with individuality. The Confederation didn't just survive, it thrived, dancing through the quantum disturbances with practiced grace. Humanity's greatest gift to us wasn't any single cultural element, the resonator speaker declared in the celebration that followed. It was showing us how different approaches could work together, how art could improve science, how play could enhance learning, how stories could bridge differences. Jessica watched as alien children played human games modified with their own cultural touches. Unity forms swirled through terraform structures while resonator music played in harmony with human classical pieces. Sentinel warriors performed elaborate dances that were both beautiful and tactical. "We thought we were teaching them," she wrote in her final report to Earth. "But they took our cultural elements and created something greater than we could have imagined. They learned not just our culture, but how to transform culture itself." As she looked out at the transformed Confederation, Jessica saw the next chapter beginning. Young aliens were already creating new art forms, new games, new ways of thinking that were neither purely human nor purely alien. They were writing a story greater than any single species could tell, the story of a galaxy learning to grow together. Humanity had given the stars not just their culture, but the courage to create new ones. And that perhaps was the greatest achievement of all.